All right, guys, thank you for that update. Right now, we're going to welcome our supply chain marketing queen, Blythe Brumleve, to the show to talk about marketing in a recession. Blythe, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. A long holiday weekend. Glad to be back, though, with you guys.
Absolutely, and it's good to have you back. And this topic is pretty interesting, I think, especially as we're going into this kind of uncertainty in economic climate, whether you're talking about just the freight space or general American economics as a whole. And I feel like when we go into recessionary times, marketing is something that would get the axe quick, right? You lose your funding, you lose, it's the first on the table to go. Can you talk a little bit about if that's the case and what you can do with the crumbs that are left over?
So 100% in my experience, whenever I've been working in freight, especially at 3PLs and 4PLs, when the downturn happens, marketing is typically the first thing that gets their budget slashed. But it should absolutely not be. I mean, I'm a little bit biased when I say this, but it absolutely should not be the first thing that gets slashed. But we should have our expectations sort of set and reset for these new, sort of economic times that we live in. And one of the ways that you need to do is, because for a lot of marketers in this space, you are juggling a lot of things. Marketing is maybe one of several jobs that you're doing. And so my theory is to get back to basics. Over the last couple of years, we've really seen just sort of an upturn in the use of technology, or not really the last couple of years, but the last sort of 5 to 10 years has been a technology sort of revolution in the marketing space. But a lot of that, come to find out over the last couple of years, especially with COVID, is that a lot of that marketing technology is just limiting in certain factors. And we're focused on data capture, and we're focused on attribution, on where these leads come from, and how we can attach a specific data point to every lead that comes through the door. But in reality, the buyer's journey, especially over the last 2 years, is extremely complicated. And they might, see a message on Slack. They might see an advertisement on Facebook, and then they might Google your company and then come to your website and convert there. And then that attribution report will tell you that visitor came from Google search instead of all the other things that you were doing that were actually working with your content marketing process, with your social media process. So it really is about taking a look at the entire landscape of what you're doing from a marketing perspective, auditing what's working. And then if you don't know what's working, if you can't attach a specific data point, which a lot of things you cannot attach a specific data point to, then you need to take a look back and add some of these different features to your website, to your different marketing materials, on how you can get a greater perspective on how those leads and how those prospects are finding out about your brand and then ultimately converting. So we can do that through a couple different ways. We can still run our attribution reports that have specific data points around our advertising and other things like that. But from the other lens is adding a simple field to your website forms. If you watch any episode of Cyberly, you sort of hear me, hammer this home every single week, is that add a field to your website forms that say, how did you hear about us? Make it a free text field where it's not a drop down. People actually have to input text information, and if they're ready to convert, that one field is not going to prevent them from actually converting on that form. And the data and the insights that you get from that form are incredible. I use it myself. I have clients that use it. And one client in particular, he's recruiting drivers, and the amount of insight that we are getting from their marketing campaigns, some of them are not even running marketing campaigns, but they're able to see, I saw your truck at a rest stop. I saw, such and such driver was talking about working for you, and so I wanted to apply. All of these different insights you would never get from a marketing report, but that simple field that took 10 minutes to add to your website is giving us so much more insight into how to better spend the limited marketing budget that you do have.
Right, that's amazing insight there, because when you think about a website, that's something that's working for you 24/7 around the clock. When I think about marketing, I think about communications and what should be pushed forward. And I know that's just one part of it. What are going to be some of the aspects that are really going to be communicated or pushed forward during recessionary times? Something that comes to top of my mind is communicating your competitive advantages. Are there any other things that you really want to hone in on during these times?
Yes. So actually, you should be super specific, because I made a point about this in a post on LinkedIn last week about how lots of websites, if you even have a website in freight, they're very bland and boring. They're very over encompassing of, we run LTL and full truckload. Well, yeah, everybody does, or a lot of companies do that. But what makes you different? Is there a specific kind of commodity, a specific kind of produce, a specific kind of equipment that you use, or an area of the country that you focus on? That's where you want your website copy to speak to. That's where you want your social media copy to speak to, because that's going to go so much further when a shipper is actually doing their due diligence. They're not going to call you on the phone and to find out exactly what you're doing. They might answer a cold call from you, but they're going to do their due diligence and research your company before they ever choose to reach out to you. And so if you have that imagery, if you have a driver that, say, is delivering, I don't know, honeybee shipments, and you have a photo of that shipment going or making it across the country or across state lines, then that picture will go so much further to other companies within that niche. So by focusing on what you specialize in and making your website speak to that target customer, it's going to go a hell of a lot further than just a generic, bland website. So always niche down, because if you can niche down, you can always expand in the future, but you can never start big and then go small. So start small with your website copy and how you're targeting those customers, because then that's going to prove later on down the line that this shipper, that this customer can actually trust you, that you've handled these types of shipments before, and they're not going to be wasting their time. I see too often where a 3PL will just put an RFQ, or request for quote form, on their website and then not speak to a target buyer. And they just expect those people to just magically show up on their website and magically convert. It doesn't happen that way, not in today's internet world. So you need to audit what you're currently doing and then speak to those customers that you're trying to go after.
Blythe, before we let you go today, let's touch on a couple of low-cost or no-cost resources that exist in the world of marketing for those companies that maybe don't have the cash to spend right now in the place, or they're looking at cutting back a little bit. What resources are out there that will allow them the potential to still capitalize on marketing strategies, but not necessarily at a high price tag?
So the first thing you want to do is it's not going to take a lot of money, but it's going to take some time, is you want to talk to your best customers right now. Also listen in on your prospecting calls to hear what kind of questions are being asked, what kind of topics are being covered, what are they struggling with, and then you can create that content in-house. If you're not a strong writer, you can film a 5-minute video using your cell phone and you can upload that to social media. These things take a time investment. They don't necessarily take a money investment. And so if you're thinking about it from that lens on how you can directly speak to your customers, it starts with talking to them first. And then once you're talking to them first, then you have some points to go off of how you can market yourself better using social media, I sort of always preach that you should pick one piece of owned land and one piece of rented land. And the owned land is your website, your podcast, or your email list. And rented land are those distribution channels. So your social media, your advertising. Pick one piece of rented land and one piece of owned land. So then that way you can speak to that target audience on that rented land and push them to the land that you actually own in the digital world. And that's your website, podcast, or email list.
Brilliant, as always. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. When can people catch your next show, Cyberly?
Every Thursday, 2 p.m. We got a couple really great episodes coming up. We got Grace Sharkey coming on for tomorrow's show, talking about building up content in the freight space and all of the things that she's doing, because I feel like she's a one-woman content machine. And then we've got some future episodes coming up with the Produce Industry Podcast, and then also a cybersecurity episode, which is kind of fitting considering, the show is named Cyberly, but every Thursday at 2 p.m.
We love it, Blythe. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for your show. Right now, we're going to head over to Sydney Edwards. She's got our next Headlines Report.